Hello everyone. This is the demonstration of the Amazement API platform intended for managing with katas, short programming challenges, and working with them as from the user's perspective for validating and checking your solutions. We'll start with the repository. Here you can find the overview of the current endpoint that allows creating users and using Google login for user creation, using GitHub endpoint for getting the access token, and after that, the endpoints for working with katas and working with submissions. We'll go through them later. This is a general architecture. We have a client which sends requests to our API endpoint. The API endpoint works with cloud storage, managed SQL database, and cloud build services. Cloud build services are used for building new kata images and testing the solutions. After that, pub/sub topic consumes the messages from cloud build, and again, API platform uses that information for updating information in the managed SQL. We'll start with creating a new kata, but before that, we need to obtain our token. We'll get it by going through this link, selecting the user that we want to create our account, for example, this one. We see that authentication was successful. Right now, the token is stored as the cookie in the browser because it's not intended to use like this in the future. So there would be some client, but for now, we'll get this cookie and use it in our REST API program for the later usage. After that, after we created our endpoint, this token will be used whenever we are in a browser navigating with our, working with our API. So all our requests will be authenticated. So next we'll get a token for GitHub also, so we can access the repositories and create source repository for our project. We'll authorize this application, and it redirects us to the main page, which is basically the documentation. After that, let's go to the REST API client, update our token, and now we can start with the workflow. First, we'll create a new kata. We need to specify name owner, and the template. I've already prepared the example of kata. So this is the kata example, which could be private or public. It should include the Docker file, which specifies the environment and how the tests should be run. Basically, if you execute this Docker image, it should run tests. And it should look for the solution in the solution directory. More on that could be found in the documentation of the main repository linked to the DevPost submission backend docs. And here in the kata is a description of how this repository should be structured. Here also the source code, which could be used later for the submission tests, and some documentation if needed here. Another important repository is the source repository or the template, which later will be used for creating a boilerplate task for the user. So in this case, the kata is the simple Python application where we need to implement the following welcome user function. We can see here that we need to do some task here in order for the kata to pass. And in the kata example repository, we see the tests, which basically just check if one test, if the response matches what we're expecting from the user submission. We specify that here. We also specify the repo reference or the hash. Send the request. We get the ID of the kata, it's 7. Now we can get some information about it, which is not very interesting because it's just created a new entry in SQL database. But now we can start the validation of our kata. For that, we specify the number of a kata, and we see that the status has changed to validation progress, and kata status validation in progress right now. Right now, it's starting a cloud build job, which will test if this repository, kata example, matches the one that should be created. So basically, it matches the standard of the kata. It has a Docker file, tests directory, solution directory, and could be executed. You can check on the kata status here. Right now, it's status 3. It's status 2 because it's not yet validated. We can see that we already have a cloud build ID. It's the ID of the cloud build job, which is right now running. And we can also see the image, which, if the kata was successful, will be built and later will be used for checking new katas. So the image will not be built every time for each kata, but instead it will use this image for faster checks. We can see now that the status has changed to 3, which means that the kata was validated successfully. And now we can start the submission. So right now we were acting as kata owners. So we created the kata, but now we will go from the users or students perspective, and we'll start submission again with the kata number 7. What it does, it creates a new repository in our account named kata example src. It also returns the status of the submission. Right now it's 1, so it means we did not yet start it. We can get the information also here. Yeah, because it's a 5, so it's a 5th submission. We can see here that we did not yet start the submission process. But let's check if the repository was created. And it's here. It was created exactly 36 seconds ago. If you start the submission now, it will fail. While we are changing the code, let's start the validation. So this request basically starts another cloud build job, which will check if the submission was successful or not. If we again execute the get request, we will see that status is 2. So it means that it's running right now. We'll start also getting some logs, but we will see right now that the tests failed. We can see it here. We need to unescape here some symbols. Right now, I will not do it. I will do it in the end. But we can see that our job failed. We can see that in the logs, we can see our kata was not validated because it's not yet working properly. So let's change the code so that it's working. For example, like this. And now again, let's submit it again. By default, this request will use the latest hash, so it will use the latest commit to our repository. If you check again, we'll see that logs are empty now. We have a new cloud build ID. And we'll soon start getting some new logs. We see that the image was pulled successfully. We are getting again some errors. Let's try it again. So the tests are running right now, and they're failing. Failing because the issue was with the writing here. So the tests were failing correctly because we need to write here welcome. And if we now commit the changes and start a new submission attempt, now this should pass, and we should see the status of our submission change to a new one. Soon we'll start seeing some logs coming in. We're seeing them right now. So the tests are running, and yeah, we can see that it was successful. Let's unescape this text here. Again, this later will be used for a web client, so it should not look good right now. And we can see that our one test was run successfully, and the status of our submission was checked to 3, which means that it was accepted. So this was the demo of the whole process. You can find more here on the diagram, how it communicates between each other, and more on the workflow, which we did right now.